my name is Maiya. I'm Senior Industrial Designer at Pilotfish, a product development agency where we help clients develop products all the way from concept to manufacturing. So first, thank you for signing up to this workshop and showing interest in the importance of actually validating a product from a human-centered approach and in order to ensure a product's success. So first, I'm going to share lightly some methods and examples of how to approach this, but for the majority of our time together, I will actually have you perform some user testing yourselves to get a little bit of more practical experience and understanding in the challenges of actually designing products for humans. So, before we dive in, let's start with a little reminder of why it's so important. Let's say you have a brilliant idea that's going to change the world for the better. You put your time and energy into defining your product, confident that the solution you have is going to solve the problem. You put more money into it by paying some designers and engineers to build the product that you've envisioned and make it manufacturable. Eager to get it to the market, you dive right into making your first pilot production, and after tweaking and ironing out your production line, you finally have a product that you can sell. You run into one slight problem. Nobody wants your product. Well, now you've essentially just spent a whole lot of money that's simply put, gone down the drain. This is why it's important to validate and verify your assumptions early, no matter how confident you are in your idea, before you sink all your savings into it. So, making a product, especially in hardware, is a long and costly journey where every decision you make is an investment. The further along you are in the product development phase, the higher the costs and potential for risk, due to longer development times and expensive tooling where decisions can't easily be reversed. So, what are some examples we can learn from? Well, while there's no shortage of examples that have failed, several of which you're probably familiar with, I want to share a particularly recent and relevant one, and that is the Humane AI pin. Are any of you guys familiar with this product?
Yeah.
Great. Then I guess I don't have to explain, but I'll say it anyway. The Human AI pin was a wearable, screenless AI assistant that was meant to replace smartphones by projecting information and responding to voice commands. And while they looked to be on the road to success, with $230 million raised in funding, it ultimately failed when it came out to the market. And this was due to poor usability, limited functionality, high cost, and unclear purpose in everyday life. Hello? In other words, the developers behind this did not do their user research. So, how can we avoid ending up in a situation like this? As mentioned, you should be validating and verifying your user needs, not just from the very beginning of a product, but continuously all the way to its final production. The most critical phase is the earliest stage, where you first want to validate, are we even building the right product? To answer this question, we need to consider a product's feasibility not only from a use case perspective, but also a technical and economic perspective. It's not enough to define a valid use case if it's not technically or economically viable. So to test for use case feasibility, initial user research is extremely important in getting a deep understanding of what problem you're actually solving for and for who. If you already have some assumptions, it's critical that you validate them with early user interviews. However, always make sure that you're asking open-ended questions with follow-up questions, there to try to learn and understand people rather than asking leading questions that might bias people to confirm your assumptions. If you already have a product idea, make a low-cost early prototype and/or renders to communicate your vision and get early feedback from users. From a technical side, it's important to break down key functions and to really distinguish between what's a must-have and what's a nice-to-have, which should be informed and defined by the use case. It's also important to identify high-risk potentials, so thinking about what might not work and what might break. And finally, to test its viability with a partial or full proof of concept, which Pavlo did a really good job of defining, which is essentially a small-scale demonstration of the technology. From an economic perspective, it's important to already start to consider the potential for cost by making early cost-benefit assessments, by making high-level estimations of a bill of materials, and already starting to think about potential manufacturing constraints, such as availability of parts, access to suppliers, and production methods. So at this early stage, it's important to consider that assessing something that doesn't yet exist is extremely difficult, not just because you don't have other competitors that you can benchmark against, but also because users themselves may make their own erroneous assumptions about hypothetical scenarios, and it's difficult to predict whether technology is actually able to be optimized or not. So just keep in mind that as you go through the process, it's important to continue these practice of testing these assumptions as you move forward and staying open to the possibility that you may have to pivot as you learn more. So, assuming that you've now defined the right product, you want to continue to verify, are we building the product right? This can be done through further prototyping and user testing. The earlier in the phase you are, the lower the fidelity it can be to quickly test a wide range of early ideas before investing more time and money into one single solution. The further you develop in your process, the higher the fidelity your prototypes can become. In general, we recommend separating functional and mechanical prototypes from appearance models, as these can often compromise on functionality and give you less useful feedback. So, who should you be testing your prototypes with? Well, this is very important, and you should always make sure that you test with people who fit your target market and your use case. And if you don't have access to the exact target, at least try to choose people that come as close to them as possible. This is because what is useful, easy to use, comfortable, or appealing is highly subjective, and it can vary greatly if you, for example, ask a highly trained medical professional who is used to certain regulatory procedures and behaviors, compared to a patient who has no medical background at all and who may or may not have limited or impaired abilities like vision or mobility. So now that we have a high-level understanding of how to validate your assumptions and when, I wanted to briefly show some examples from our past work to demonstrate how the evolution of an early proof of concept to a more refined design might look. So this is an example of the evolution of a wearable product that was designed to be worn overnight for sleep tracking. From a usability perspective, this was super challenging, as we had competing requirements that were difficult to achieve. On one hand, we had a holding stability requirement in an environment that is highly subject to unpredictable movements and sleeping positions, and on the other, we had a comfort requirement on an area of the body that is highly sensitive to even slight disturbances, which could negatively impact someone's sleep. On top of all this was the challenge that we face with all wearables, which is making it fit a really wide range of the population. So on the very left side, you can see our early proof of concepts, which was mainly exploring a wide range of form factors to quickly test the impact of different volume placements and its impact on comfort and stability. You can see we did a bit of user testing in the middle, and on the right, you can see some more refined versions of the version that we selected and decided to move forward with. Here's another example, which I won't go into detail about from a product perspective, but it shows kind of the wide range of prototyping fidelities, all the way from really early cardboard mock-ups that's testing more the high-level shape and interaction, to more refined surfacing in the middle, and things that come closer to the final surfacing and materials, all the way to the final product that you see on the right. This is one last example that shows some early exploration on the left around body placement, which eventually led to more refined models closer to the final design that you can see on the right here. And we actually brought these physical samples here, so you're welcome to come and have a look at them if you're interested after the workshop. So now that we've covered some theory, let's jump into the fun stuff. We're now going to walk you through how to gather some user feedback on some early stage concepts of a product to do some early validation on your product idea. So what's the problem you're solving for? Well, it's a widespread problem that affects roughly 75% of the population to some degree or another. Stage fright. So, whether from public speaking, presentations, or artistic performances, it's one of the most common forms of social anxiety and can deeply limit people's ability to express themselves, share ideas, or perform to their full potential. You found from your research that current coping strategies like therapy, breathing, or meditation are beneficial in the long run, but these tools often fail in moments of acute anxiety. So who's your target user? Well, you've defined your persona. And if you're not familiar with what a persona is, it's essentially an imagined character that personifies the collection of user needs and pain points identified from user research. This helps us to identify and prioritize key features as we consider the product functions and design and how it should integrate into people's daily lives. Now, the persona you've defined is Aiko, the hyper-vigilant good student. Aiko grew up with a disciplined piano routine from a young age with a constant pressure to perform flawlessly at piano recitals, despite her obvious dread. From years of being judged on performance and perfection, she's now hyper-attuned to being watched and judged and struggles with intense physical anxiety when speaking or performing in front of an audience. Despite her attempts to improve over years of therapy and meditation, she still struggles with acute physiological stress when performance pressure spikes. She's a young working professional in her early 30s with a mixed nationality, growing up in various international schools, and while she cares about performance and doing a good job, she also values her health and well-being and generally prefers holistic approaches to problems. This all sounds very familiar. I wonder where you got your research from. So, you've identified some key needs and pain points of your persona. Some key needs you've identified are staying composed and grounded during public speaking or performance situations, using calming techniques that don't draw attention or feel like tech, maintain a sense of authenticity and self-control rather than medicating or numbing. And some pain points that you've identified include sudden physiological reactions which override mental coping strategies, and wearable tech that often feels intrusive, visible, or data hungry. So you've identified some key scenarios to help set the scene. These include stage performances like music, dancing, acting, public speaking events, presentations at work, and workshops with larger groups at Motion Lab. So you believe you've developed a solution to this using a novel and non-invasive technology that essentially detects performance anxiety and uses temperature to gently bring your focus back inward and calm your nervous system. You're currently at the stage where you've tested the technology and you know that it's effective at achieving the desired result. Now you're exploring how to arrange the technology into a more portable and usable form factor. Since its early stage, you want to explore a few different product architectures and mainly want to assess the initial size and handleability of your technology. Since we're a larger group of people, we've divided the concept into two larger subgroups. The first group being a more compact solution, but since it uses less electrodes, it's less accurate. The second group being less compact solution, but it's more accurate due to more sensors. So this means that if you're testing concept 1A, you want to compare it to 1B, and if you're testing 2A, you want to compare it to 2B. So for the first concept, you've decided to combine all the technology into one housing. For the technology to work optimally, it must be placed on the arm in a certain position. And you can find how to put it on in the instructions at the table for your reference. For the second concept, one of the sensors has been separated from the main housing, and this was to allow for more adaptability to different muscle sizes. But on the other hand, it has a taller profile because the battery is now stacked on top of the other components. For the third one, we have two of the sensors separated from the main housing with a ground electrode in the main housing on the other side. And this significantly improves the accuracy because you're placing the electrodes in different areas of the body. For the fourth concept, it's essentially the same as the third, but the battery has been split from the main housing and combined with the other sensors to explore whether distributing the weight is beneficial or not. So, now that you have your concepts, let's dive into some testing. And just one word of caution, since these are still early paper mock-ups, they may break during testing, which is okay, but just keep it in mind when handling, and we brought some extra tape just in case. So, for the first half of the exercise, you'll be testing the first concept within your group. Then for the second, you will swap concepts with the other group and test the other one. So the first thing you want to do is assign one person to be the test subject, and the rest will then take notes and observations. Ask the participant to put the prototype on, as shown in the instructions, and make sure that you're observing what they're doing, not just saying. As they are interacting with it, note down any usability issues or pain points that you notice as they interact with it. Then, after, you will ask them to perform some activities that are relevant to the scenarios you've identified. So, for example, you can ask them to pretend like they're speaking at a podium, or do a performative dance, or pretend like they're playing the piano. Again, observe what they do, not just say, and note down what you notice in terms of pain points. Then, after all that, you will collect feedback based on the assessment criteria, which you will also find at the table. And then you will swap concepts and compare. So, go ahead. Okay, then I think that wraps up the workshop for today. Thank you guys for your contribution and your engagement. I hope you guys learned something from it. But now, basically, we're going to go into a break, and you're welcome to go over for some drinks and snacks over there. I think it'll be about 20 minutes until the next one. And then, during the break, there will be a QR code up here that you can use to access the presentations as well. So thank you, guys.